Everyone to another EOS Talk. Today is Saturday, April 14th, 2018, and I am Official Fuzzy, here to ride with you through the blockchain universe beyond Bitcoin. So you can join us each Saturday here at 8 p.m. Eastern generally on YouTube and other streaming places where are going to be opening up here in the future. We join every week to discuss on these discussions important updates in the EOS community and our attempts to build Voltron in the space between chains. So we try to create cross-chain synergy, and we use these powerful cross-chain utility tokens that helped us accomplish this. And for this reason, we use them to expand into construction of tools and community building exercises and benefit EOS in a way that very few other community building tools can, because none of them up to this point, even in cryptocurrency, could really offer things at the speed and with decentralization in mind. So with that said, we like to utilize this to build other things like these forums that we run called EOSTalk Forums. Where if you go there, you can actually see every day we have the price right there in the forums. These forums are running on Steam, which is a mutual aid society blockchain based on depots. It is a single threaded chain, and it runs forums right here in front of your eyes. So you can go there every day. You can check out updates on things. And we have utilized these cross-chain tokens to build this, to pay for this and fund it to be built, right? So we've got this. And we also have amazing guests that sometimes bless us in the EOS ecosystem that we like to reward some of these tokens to. And we like to reward them also to you, the audience, for participating in the community engagements that help our guests in different ways that we can build community-based things and initiatives to help them and to promote what they're doing in this space when we believe in what they're doing. So with that said, we do have a great guest tonight who's going to be joining us, and we have an agenda here. So I'll just really quickly go over it. We're going to talk about these the EOSDAC here on the forums, talk a little bit about blocktivity.info, and then we have a special guest speaker who is going to be joining us tonight. And he is Vasja Bocko. I think I'm saying that correctly. And Vasja, please tell me if I'm not. But he is here to talk about something that is very important, use case that I've discussed in our previous Beyond Bitcoin Hangouts in various instances of time, in terms of what some valuable use case might be for blockchain. And that is to be able to truly offer you the ability to own your own medical information. And that is what the IRYO DApp is going to be working toward. And this is what Vasja is going to be talking about tonight with everybody. We will have a community question and answer session after we have approximately 15 to 20 minute interview with him and just get a kind of an idea of what this project means in the space and means to you guys who are trying to be responsible users of this technology, which is another thing that we're trying to foster here. So with that said, I just really quickly want to show everybody and make sure that everybody does see that we have the forums. If you go to eostalk.io, and you can actually go to @EOSDAC, or it would be /@EOSDAC. You can see updates on EOSDAC. And I just really quickly, we brought this up because this is one of the places where I believe we're going to be seeing a lot more updates. This is using our blockchain technology, and they are actually on here doing some cool things. And the EOSDAC, we have a couple updates from them, just really quickly important updates. The share drop, there was an issue that there's a scammer going around trying to pretend to be them. So don't ever give your keys to anybody who asks you for your keys in the future. Whenever EOS is out, those people are, we're not going to have to worry about that when EOS is out, but we have to worry about that now. When people ask for your keys, make sure that if you're getting an airdrop, you're doing it in ways that are responsible and don't put your keys at risk. This is a great example. In response, some great news came from the bad news of it, which is the OpenLedger is now announced that they're going to support the EOSDAC airdrop onto Open.EOS tokens on the BitShares DEX. So if you're holding Open.EOS on the BitShares DEX, you will automatically be given those tokens. You won't have to register or do anything else. You can hold them and just wait and sit on them, and you'll be given the airdrops right then. So just to let everybody know, this is probably one of the safer ways until EOS is out. And we can obviously continue using these tools, but these are the tools that you have at your fingertips, right? So with that said, really quickly, just want to remind everybody, if you are part of this community, if you're part of EOS, if you're part of a delegated proof of stake blockchain that is just not underrepresented, make sure to check out blocktivity.info. If you're somebody who's trying to advocate for this technology and you're trying to explain things to people, it's very hard sometimes to explain things about the power of our technology, especially with the current framing of data in the space. So when you go to places like CoinMarketCap and those sites, nothing against them, of course, but they frame the data in a certain way, so it gives you the impression of a certain thing that drives value, and that is based on trading volume and the market cap at the time, right? And this lends some problems to pumps and dumps and things like that in the space becoming a bigger incentive for that, right? So most people will fall into, when they're new, will fall into the decision of going in and just grabbing top tokens, not necessarily knowing what they are. And this is kind of a trap for newbies. So if you're somebody who's an advocate or you're somebody who's new, go to blocktivity.info. Check out, as you're looking here, how these different blockchains that are represented actually show you how much of the network capacity they're at when they're using certain amounts of transactions per day. And as you can always tell, Steem, BitShares are in the top of the pack among other cryptocurrencies, and they're generally always at less than or very close to 1%, 0.1%, or 1% of the capacity of the network itself. So you're looking at very little of the blockchain actually being used. So this is the kind of stuff that we're looking at, just something to always point people to when you're trying to show them and trying to explain to them why this technology is valuable. These are tools that are kind of in your toolbox. And that's what we like to frame this whole discussion around, is tools in the toolbox that we can offer as a community and that we can put together. And these are the things that if you leverage these as tools, you can empower yourself with this technology, and you can also maybe teach some people something that will help EOS and help them in the long run as well, right? And if we can do those things, we've accomplished a lot. So with that said, we have a couple community initiatives that Steem PowerPix is going to discuss. I just want to make it clear that these are not going to necessarily be specifically about EOS, but they are in relation to synergistic propositions and initiatives that we're doing. So please feel free, Steem PowerPix, as the community organizer here, to discuss some of what we are up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Fuzzy said, this week our initiatives are not EOS related, but they are synergistic. We always try to find ways to, intermingle between the chains. So we call our cross-chain synergy. So this week we are focusing on BitShares, since we have the new BitsharesTalk.io forums that are being developed that are connected to WhaleShares. And last week we had the contest for people to come up with a new logo for the BitsharesTalk.io forums, and we've come up with our top 5 finalists. And we basically just posted up a quick, we basically wanted feedback from everyone else. We want to have the community help us make a decision. So everyone's been weighing in on their votes, which ones they think are more appropriate for the forums, giving their feedbacks, and then that will kind of be totaled up. The comments will be taken into consideration and then discussed with the dev team. Because right now, I know people have made the comment that right now C is the one that's actually up on the forums now, and I had made a comment before saying that we're kind of testing these out on the platform, seeing how they look and stuff. So don't get stuck on what's on there now. Just kind of go through and give your honest opinion and feedback to which one you think is the best, and that kind of fits or shows community conversation, forums and talking. So that's all really for that one. The other one that we just started on Friday, get my days mixed up, is a BitShares meme challenge. And this one we're looking for, I put the Yoda thing up for our master Yoda, create a BitShares meme you must, and when beyond bits you will. We're looking for people to come up with humorous ways to present BitShares and the BitShares DEX. We always talk a lot about how humor is one way to really get your point across without offending people or causing fights. So, we know that all the depost chains and everything we have are, 3-second transaction times and everything else that makes it much better than, all the other cryptocurrencies and stuff that are out there, and a lot better to use than the centralized exchanges that are starting to become regulated over time. So we want you to get out there and create a funny meme that we can use across all of our different channels and forums, social media, and just stick it to them. Show your support, but do it in a funny way. We don't want anything kind of distasteful or anything like that, but just get out there and make a meme for us. And we also have, as we always do behind this, is our tokens for tweets. So if you don't have the ability to do the artwork to make the memes, go ahead and share it. Share the contest on Twitter. We do have everything you need. You just copy and paste in the tweet and attach the graphic and share it out there. Spread the word and let other people come in and help. This week, just like last week with the logo design itself, we have a huge response with people coming out and making these memes. It's great. I mean, even some of the BitShare leadership that we always see in our BitShares hangouts, like this morning, are actually in here making memes as well. So this is something that's great. The contest itself is going viral, and hopefully when we're done, the memes themselves will also go viral. So.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on you here, these are rewarding these cross-chain tokens that we use that I always refer to jokingly but seriously as Voltron, and the parts that interlink the parts to Voltron, the different lions have to come together, right? There has to be that communication and that collective function between the various robots that come together and form Voltron. Right. And I look at these as the different chains coming together and forming various cross-chain utility functions, and we are using this today for some amazing things. The memes were amazing up to this point. They are hilarious. The content that we get is great. When people, when we have writing competitions, when you have the art competitions, all of these things are the types of things that we can help the EOS community as well, and we have with EOS Cafe, for instance. They still to this day run around with various using the same logo that was created by our community. These are the types of things that we're doing on a grassroots level, and I just want to tell you that without the community like you guys who help me, we wouldn't be able to do such cool things. So I really thank you guys, and I thank everybody who participates. And I urge you guys, because I want to talk a little bit offline about helping IRYO with maybe something fun for the community. But I would urge, when we have these guest speakers and they're doing cool things and they're staying up until 3 in the morning and drinking coffee to talk to us, that you consider just taking a moment when you see the community engagements that we're doing to help them to participate in it if you think it is a good idea, if you think it's valuable, or even if you think that there are other ways that you might be valuable and you don't want to participate in that way. There are always ways that you can help, even if you don't have money, right? So with that said, is there anything, Steam Power Picks, that you would like to say before we move on to our special guest for the night?
No, that's good. I mean, that's always been our focus, like you said, is finding ways to make synergistic, cross-chain initiatives. We're not about abandoning one or the other. It's about how we can get these all to work together, and that includes EOS coming up.
Oh, heck yeah, it includes EOS. This is what Beyond Bitcoin's been waiting for, baby.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, we still have the memes and the fan art stuff that we did for EOS. I mean, months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, still circulating on Twitter and Telegram. So it's great to see. I mean, these things live on, so they serve their purpose.
Still, well, let me ask real quick then. This is a perfect moment to ask. Vasja, have you seen the CryptoKitty memes or any of them at this point?
Hello, everyone, and I have to disappoint you. I have not seen them.
Oh, well.
This now, so I'm when I hang,
check it out. Well, thank you for joining up tonight. All jokes aside, we try to keep to the mantra of laugh about the silliness and try to work through it and do valuable things. So there's something that's going good, right? And it's always a treat to bring on people who are really thinking on Bitcoin, like what the blockchain can do, right? There are certain, when they read about the blockchain, it's literally like an addiction. And you sit there and you're like, okay, well, I can do this, right? And you guys are forming a DApp that really is at the foundations of some of the most important issues of our lives, right? And at a time when it's absolutely necessary, right, for you to hold and own your own medical data. So, yeah, obviously, say about that. But let's go out, if we can start out just by you giving kind of an introduction of, what got you here today, what IRYO is in your words, because you say it a lot more often than I do. So you probably have some very wonderful ways of teaching people. And then maybe we can discuss a little bit, just a couple questions that I would bring up. And Steam Power Picks has one, and then we can open it up to the community discussion as well, maybe for 10, 15 minutes of community questions. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so let me start with why we got into healthcare and why we started working on IRYO. I think, as you said, healthcare is one of the fundamental things of a modern society now, and it's something that touches everyone. Every one of us has been to the doctor before, has needed some sort of healthcare throughout their life. And at the same time, healthcare is an industry which costs a lot of money. On average, there's 10% of the GDP, so $1 in every $10 is spent on healthcare on average. In the States, that's more like $1 in $5 that gets spent on healthcare. And if you look at the healthcare IT, there's not been so many great advantages there because of the IT. And we're all geeks and we all believe in data and how data can help a lot of things. But there's two fundamental problems that we see in healthcare now with respect to data, which is being able to exchange that data, to aggregate it, get something meaningful out of it, and then at the same time make sure that that data is secure, because we think that healthcare data is one of the most sensitive types of data out there. It's obviously personal identifiable information. There's stuff there that no matter who you are, whether you're a famous person or not a famous person, there's stuff there that shouldn't be revealed. And yet at the same time, we read almost on a weekly basis about hacks, about ransomware, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's what really got us into the healthcare IT, and then to start working on IRYO. And then to answer the second part of your question, what IRYO is, the way I usually explain it in one sentence is a global backbone for healthcare data. So we're building a network, the IRYO network, which we basically want to run as a foundation, where the network has the capability to provide data exchange between different actors in the network, and can also store that data in a safe way, in a distributed way, and it gives the end users, the patient, the full autonomy to own and to control their own data.
So, as you mentioned, of course, there's a lot of times when the data comes up into the hands of people who are not supposed to have it. And that in and of itself is almost, when you think about the privacy of and the sanctity of that, that's the most personal that you can get, almost to a level of danger if somebody ever wants to harm you. Even there's a lot that can be learned about somebody by learning about their medical records, right? And
yeah,
we are in interesting times, as the saying goes. So it's cool to see that there are technologies that are working on standing up on the precipice of this, and kind of being kind of a shield, almost.
And I think it's in a way, it's, nobody thinks about that stuff until it becomes a problem. Nobody was thinking about Facebook holding a lot of data on the users until that became a problem. And we think that healthcare data is even far more sensitive than that, really. And it's not just the data leaking out, it's also making sure that some of the data doesn't get hacked or changed, because that can be also life-threatening. So it's something that we really need to think about. And I think the paradox here is that as we go along, it's already happening, but in a few years' time, the amount of healthcare data is going to grow exponentially. It's going to grow because hospitals, healthcare providers are going to digitalize the workflows even more than they do now. And we're going to have more IoT devices. We're going to have more wearables. And so we're going to end up with a lot of sensitive data. And that data needs to be stored. It needs to be handled. It needs to be made useful, but it also needs to be secure. And it needs to be put in the hands of the patients or the end users, and the end users get to decide whether someone can use that data or not.
So we talked a little bit about this already, obviously, and you've covered it beautifully, by the way. But we're at the point where you said it's going to grow exponentially. And when you're wearing these wearable devices, this is data that we talked about even behind the scenes, that all this stuff is going to, it's going to fill a ledger, essentially, instead of a medical record, a medical chart, a standard medical chart. Obviously, they'll be displayed for humans that way. But that's essentially where all this data is going to be stored. You're going to have the key to your own data. And if somebody ever wants to keep certain things private or public, they'll be able to essentially use the key to make public something for various use cases that they need, right?
Yeah, so the idea is that we use something called zero-knowledge data storage, which means that the IRYO network will, for every end user, the network will generate a public and private key, and then all of the data that belongs to that user will be encrypted with that public and private key. And so all the data that is stored in the network cannot be decrypted and read by anyone unless that end user gives them the explicit right to do so. And so when they do that, then the data gets decrypted and someone else can look into it. And that's obviously, if we just talk about the use case of the doctors, that's maybe not as revolutionary. But if we start debating things like getting data to researchers, then I think that's where it gets really interesting. So, I think there's a lot of people out there who, for example, they have a relative who had cancer or died of cancer. And if there's a cancer research out there and they're looking for data, I think there's going to be a lot of people who will want to, free of charge, hand over a lot of their healthcare data if that's going to help in the research. But right now, there's no transparent way of doing that. So the patients right now, they don't know who exactly shares that data, where it goes, how it's used. Is it anonymized? Is it not anonymized?
Is it weaponized?
Exactly. And so, but I'm an optimist, and I think a lot of people would want to do that altruistically. But then also at the same time, we have this thing called tokens, right? Where also if people are not so altruistic, then you can give them a nudge to share the data and give some tokens in exchange. So that's also nice.
Well stated. Well stated. I mean, let's face it. The people who grew up in video games tend to be the people who really they see cryptocurrency and they're like, okay, I know, I've seen this in some fashion or form before. So I can almost guarantee you were a gamer at some point, but I won't talk about that at this point. But we're looking at the empowerment of everybody if we leverage this. Now, the one thing that a lot of people might ask though is, how do we govern this DApp? Like, how do we, during times where there are things that we might not expect to happen and we need to change, change controls. How are these things going to work in this decentralized app that is harboring, offering us the ability to store securely all of our most precious information, really?
Yeah.
So how would yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good question. And there's two dimensions to this. One is obviously the purely technical one, which we can go into a bit later. But I mean, the important thing here is, technically speaking, that the data does not only reside in this, central database somewhere, and then either us as IRYO or the healthcare provider or someone else is the gatekeeper to that. But it's actually, the data is decentralized and it's put into the hands of the patient. So that's obviously number one. But then from the governance point of view, we want to run IRYO Network as a foundation. That's number one, a foundation that has really clear goals and aims, what it wants to do. And we've already, we've been saying this we've been public with IRYO for maybe half a year now. And so one of the things that we truly believe in is open source software. And unfortunately, again, in healthcare, there is not a lot of open source software. And with what we're developing with IRYO Network, we are 100% committed to open sourcing everything that we do, including we developed a bot for our airdrop, and someone asked us, and then we open source that as well. And we think open source software is really the best way to ensure that the software does what we say it does, and there's no backdoor, there's no hidden agendas anywhere, anything like that. And so, people who are interested, people who have the skills can go in, can look at the code, can make suggestions, can make improvements. It's going to be under an open source license, so that anyone can take it, can modify it, can do whatever they want with it. But the IRYO network core software, is in a way, there's two things that it needs to do. So one is to support exchange of healthcare data, and the other one is to provide a safe haven for that data for the patients.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and you already answered it, but it's something that I think that it's good to kind of reiterate, though, is that you're going to enable people to essentially in an open source fashion, real life, like live time, find errors and bugs like they do in a lot of open source communities, leverage that ability for it to almost like a self-healing mechanism that these communities have.
Yeah.
And you're going to do this in an open way. And just to make it, tie it into something that you said before, the zero knowledge proofs, I believe, in addition to all of this, for those who are not familiar with zero knowledge proofs, some of you are, you're a nerd, mind you, if you do. But a zero knowledge proof really makes it so you don't have to even show your keys. So I think that that's also something important to recognize, that the governance of the chain really, of the dApp doesn't really ever touch your keys. Nothing touches your keys except for you. You're just showing that you have proof that you have your keys, right? Which is a great deal on that front. Now, the fact that it's almost self-healing, I think, is another amazing thing. And just to zero in on the reiteration of something else that's important, is that it's not opaque. We've said that it's open source, but it's not opaque. Like you said, you're talking about a lot of these other software and all the other stuff that is being used, and it's, not everybody gets to see what's going on all the time with it. And there's supposed to be a bunch of oversight behind the scenes on certain things. And we're obviously seeing that oversight doesn't do a good job. And then you see, well, can the decentralized community heal it?
It's interesting when you spend some time talking to various people in the healthcare industry or healthcare community, how far off the understanding of open source software is, because people in the healthcare community still perceive open source software as in the software that gives open access to anyone for the data, which is not at all.
It's scary to them.
Yeah, and it's scary to them. And, we're sort of on the geek side of this, and we say, there's a reason why there's so many servers running Linux. There's a reason why open source software is so widely adopted. It's because if you have a community which, ICOs, crypto projects have, if you have a community behind, there's any security hole, any bug, anything that is problematic with the software will be identified 10 times quicker and probably fixed 100 times quicker than it would normally be. And you can't hide behind whatever wall, because everything's out there and everything's public. And so we think that with something as serious as healthcare IT, that should really be the norm. It shouldn't be, IRYO shouldn't be an outlier here, but that should be something that everybody does.
And just real quick, I know you answered this earlier, and it's a difficult question, obviously, and a lot of people, like you said, they don't really ask these questions. But I think, you mentioned earlier when I was talking how we want to use this tech responsibly, right? So obviously I asked you a question. You had a pretty good answer for it, to be frank. And it was, the dangers of using technology like this if we're not responsible, essentially. What are some of the potential downsides? Are there anything that that we needed to, as a community that's interested in this stuff, say, man, this is stuff that we can always improve upon, or there are these things that we should be considering if it's a worst case scenario, just different things like that go on.
Yeah, there's one thing that we worry about a lot, which is what a lot of people don't realize is that as soon as you start aggregating data, as soon as you have a lot of data about either one individual or a lot of individuals, is that even if you anonymize that data, it becomes, as the amount of data grows, it becomes increasingly easier to de-anonymize that. And so we have the famous example of Netflix, who basically gave out a bounty to anyone who would improve their suggestion algorithm, which is that piece of software where you end up watching one TV show and then it will suggest you to watch something else. And so for that, towards that end, they gave out a lot of anonymized data on viewers. And they thought that was really anonymous data, and then some person was able to de-anonymize that data and identify real people behind that, and it became a problem, and it was this whole scandal. And that's something that with, people are putting more and more information on social networks. There's more information publicly available on the internet, and with all of that, de-anonymization gets easier. And so one of the things that we really worry about and we think about a lot, and it's something that I think we will need to constantly be aware of, that as the aggregate amount of data in IRYO network grows, that is something that could potentially start happening. And so that's why we need to start working on new approaches on how to mine that data, to go from the approach that is copy data and then analyze. So for example, if there's a researcher that wants to mine data for researching some disease, the approach shouldn't be let's copy the data that's relevant from IRYO network, from the patients that gave them consent, copy it to the researcher's computer and then analyze it there, but let's analyze all the data in place. So let's analyze the data with the patients. Let's not give that data out. That's something that we think is really the future if you want to keep anonymity and still have data available for research. But there's a lot of work to be done there.
Hey, Fuzz, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, I was going to ask. Yeah, I was just going to say thank you very much for answering the questions. And Steam Power Picks has another question, and then we're going to go into the community segment. Sure. SPP, if you had something before that, feel free to talk about anything else too, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of related to that. Earlier you had talked about the 3 levels of data storage, where it's like personal, provider, and cloud. So I wanted to know if you could kind of touch on that and kind of give an explanation of that. And then going along with that, here in the States, I'm sure even around the world, you hear about our craziness with our healthcare system and our everything to do with insurance and all this other junk. So I want to know, how will IRYO, how will the data platform kind of integrate with our insurance provider here in the States? And does that cause any issue as far as people, like we have pre-existing conditions and also there's stuff that we have to juggle over here? How does that really play into that when this information is all out there on a chain or a personal device? Like, how does this work for privacy in that way?
Yeah, so first of all, how do we handle storage in IRYO network? So the idea is that there's decentralized storage, and every piece of data or piece of information is stored in 3 places. So all of the patient's data is stored on that patient's device, which is usually a phone. Then all of that data, a copy of that data, is also stored on an IRYO network node that is run by a healthcare provider. And then the 3rd copy is on the IRYO network cloud. Now, all of those copies are, even though one copy is with the healthcare provider, one copy is on the IRYO cloud, all of them are fully encrypted, zero knowledge. So even though they're stored there for sort of a backup and to be able to access that in case there's no internet access and stuff like that, but assuming that the patient gives consent. So that's the way we're handling the data storage. When it comes to compliance questions, it's difficult to have one answer. And one thing that we do know of is that there will be a lot of money spent on legal compliance throughout various countries, because EU has its own regulation, US has its own regulation. Obviously, one of the things that's really important in the US with private insurance is that the HIPAA Act, which is basically one of the main things that it says, is that pre-existing conditions cannot be known to the insurance companies, because they could potentially turn you down for insurance. And so the data, obviously, that goes into the network will not be public. The data will only be seen and controlled by the patient. And the patient already, according to all the current legislation, has full rights to see, accept doctor's notes. There's a couple of edge cases, but they have the right to see all of that data. They basically have the right to get a copy of all of that data, and that is exactly what we're doing with the IRYO network. None of that goes to the insurance company. An insurance company could integrate with the network, tap into the data, but for every call into the network to try to get some data on the patient would get a notification saying this and this insurance company wants to access your files. Are you okay with that? And they can say no. And for example, in EU, there's something called GDPR coming in effect in 2 months, and it goes even further than that. And it says that every patient has the right to request that the healthcare provider that holds some data on that patient, the patient can request for that provider to delete all of the data. So they can ask them first to give them all the data they have on that patient, and then they can ask them to delete that data. And the healthcare provider needs to provide a proof that they have effectively deleted all the data they had on that person. So it really gives a lot of control to the IRYO network, to the patient, which is basically what IRYO network is also technically trying to achieve.
So with that, like, how does that? I was going to say, how does that work then into billing, where you were talking about the insurance providers being able to kind of tap into the healthcare providers? How does that work as far as billing? Would IRYO be able to actually integrate into billing, or is this a separate thing?
It would be, so everything with healthcare providers, there's a couple of ways how you can do it with the billing, with the ERP, with the hospital information systems. But basically everything could originate from the electronic health records. And so potentially, you could build an add-on for billing as well. The only problem there is that that needs to be done on a case-by-case basis, because it's the billing then really has a lot to do with the legislation and the how insurance is structured and all of that stuff.
Right. Okay. Cool.
It's a good question too, Steam Power, because it's like that's almost like a gray area that we haven't really seen yet. How will that turn out? There's going to be a lot that we don't really end up knowing about it. But I guess going back to the main point and what we should hope that it becomes, and what I think you guys exemplify really, is what HIPAA means to do and its stated goals are really, which is to ensure that the medical records are owned by the patient, and not the other else is just a custodian that the patient says can have it. But we both know that that's not the current state of things, and that's so important to recognize. So this should be a wet dream for any people like HIPAA. If they're like looking at HIPAA, they should be going, "Oh my God, this is the best thing since sliced bread." This is what we've been waiting for. Let's hope that's what the response is. So sorry, go ahead.
One of the comparisons that I usually give is that, especially with GDPR, because I think it's much stricter than HIPAA is that the user is the owner of the data. But the problem is that ownership is not the same as control. And so the comparison we give is like, I own a car, but then my wife always has the keys. And so it's not really useful if I just legally own the car if I don't actually control it. And that's what we're trying to do. So yes, you know, with a lot of the regulation around the world, healthcare data is owned by the patient, sure. But if that data is then locked into a data silo somewhere with a hospital somewhere where you have to knock on the door and then be really polite that they will maybe in a month's time give you all of that data, and then if you're even more polite, they might delete all of that data if you decide to do so. That's very different from you being able, so for someone else to come to you and say, can I please get that data from you?
Yeah, it's awesome, and I look forward to it. And I also would like to, of course, open it up for any community questions. Compound, if you have any community questions that are coming in. Meta, if you have any community questions coming in. But obviously, I have plenty more, and I'm sure SPP and maybe Meta does as well. So feel free, obviously, to step up, guys.
Yeah, my only other question would be about the records that it stores. Is it solely just data? Because, I mean, we go to hospitals and stuff, we get scans, x-rays, things like that. What actually gets stored?
Yeah, so it's not just strings, it's not just text-based data, it's any type of rich media. So it can be videos, it can be images, all of that stuff. So the only difference then is that, you know, if you go do a CAT scan or MRI, or a full DNA sequencing, for example, is about 150 gigs. So that rich media would then not be stored on the patient's phone because that would be too much, but is held on the cloud and then controlled by the patient. But otherwise, all of the healthcare data goes in.
Oh, this makes me giddy, man. Like, I was in the healthcare field for a while in psychology type stuff. And this is like, when you learn about HIPAA, you realize how beautiful of a concept it is. It's almost like common law, you know. Maybe we should think about that again too. But it's like you control something that is yours. Congratulations, you know. Real quick, and this is something I didn't ask you in the beginning, and I apologize for it, because this should be the question that I ask all the time, but I already take for granted, and I think SPP probably will appreciate this as well. Why are you guys building on EOS? We already know. So, but why? But for anybody who's new to EOS and doesn't understand what we're doing, like, please kind of illuminate them on this one.
Yeah. So a really quick and short answer to that is that it was the best platform for our use cases. But why is it the best platform? Is a couple of things. So one is that we are using the EOS public ledger as a distributed access control list. So basically, me as the patient, if I decide to give access to my files to a doctor somewhere, that information gets sent onto the EOS ledger. And so we cannot have CryptoKitties, you know, completely halting stopping the network, because then that doctor will wait for that access for maybe a couple of hours. And so that was the number one thing that we said, you know, this stuff needs to be instant. That was one thing.
Saves lives.
Sorry?
Speed saves lives, essentially. In this.
Exactly. And in healthcare data, that actually, you know, can be the case. And then secondly, we want those transactions to be free for the end users. And with the EOS, the way EOS is done, we can do that, and we cannot do that with Ethereum or any other platform that might be a potential candidate. And that is because with the EOS staking system, you know, for example, if we own 1% of EOS coins, then our dApp can then use 1% of the bandwidth of the entire network. And then as long as we keep that traffic that the dApp generates under that 1%, then all of that traffic, all of those transactions are free for anyone who is making those transactions, which are the end users, the patients. And so that was the other thing. And we think a lot of people are asking us, because we started saying this a couple of months ago, and we said that EOS is really the only platform where we can do this. And people were saying, oh, well, but you're betting your project on a platform that's not live yet, that's not proven yet, that's not tested yet. And I think every month, a lot of those people are proven otherwise. And I think we're going to be, really soon, we're going to have a really robust network that can support us in what we're doing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what these chains do. And that's why we always, like every week, I'm not going to lie, Vasja, like we beat the people in the head with blocktivity.info. And I have to apologize to all of our viewers, but we do it for that reason. So people can see like the number of transactions per second and per day that we can have on these chains just with a single threaded chain is like more than we need for any use case at this point in time. But now we're starting to have all these different dApps that are going to come together and start using EOS. And it's going to be multi-threaded, and they're going to have their own, essentially like their own threads on EOS. And it's going to operate in its own place, but and in parallel. And there's going to, oh my God, it's going to be epic on one level beyond what we already see, which is epic. You know what I mean? So how do we go beyond that? I think the question at this point really is, how epic will it be? Because I already think that I don't see it being less epic than what we already see, because Dan is met, as everybody's seeing, and he's got an amazing team. The community's amazing. The people like you guys who are doing what you were doing with the knowledge level that you have. I mean, we're in a good place, and everybody who's out there talking trash about EOS as a technology and as a chain, the fact that it has all these things going for it, and they're unwilling to say those things, should make you question if it's what we call FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And if you're a newbie, we want you to know about FUD and like how facts can combat FUD. So check out blocktivity.info be able to see what the chains presently can do. If you have any questions of whether what these guys are talking about is going to be possible on the chain that we call EOS. So just real quick, Steam Power Picks, do you have anything that you would like to say in finishing, or has any final question come in from anybody out?
No, you're not sure on the stream there, but I just wanted to know if we wanted to touch on the ICO and stuff for the crowd fund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So there was, for maybe if there's any listeners that have been following us, there has been a couple of changes with regards to the crowd sale. So initially we were planning to do the ICO on Ethereum, now on ERC20 tokens, and then do a token swap, and then obviously migrate to EOS once EOS mainnet is live. That was supposed to happen end of March, early April, but then we decided that right now, because of the market sentiment, because of needing to do the token swap, needing to do the token listings twice, that it doesn't make sense for us to do that. And also there were a couple of people still out there that were saying, oh, but EOS is not live yet, and there's a risk in this, and blah blah blah. And then we said, okay, we're gonna postpone the ICO. We're gonna do it on EOS as soon as it's live. So now, if EOS mainnet goes live June 1st, and then everything is okay, it consolidates, then we aim to be one of the first projects to be doing the ICO there.
Okay, I guess we have a couple questions from chat. Feel free, Wally or Compound. I thought that Compound was doing it, but either way, anybody who's wanting to read that off, or SBP.
Let me know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, perfect. There's someone asking, they say, well, much like the cryptocurrency space, these big pharmacy companies, a lot of this stuff is going to take their profit. How do you think that will play out?
The pharma companies taking their profit.
I'm just reading the question. Let me see. So basically, it says, do you envision that this will help us to start treating the cause of illnesses rather than symptoms? The healthcare industry and big pharmacy won't like that.
Yeah, but that's why we think it's so important for the patients to own their data, because we believe that there will be some network effects when that starts happening. So if you have companies that, if they need data, if they need the patient's involvement, if they can go directly to the patient, and then the patient can decide whether they're going to give him data, whether they're going to be part of the research or whatever, then we're really bypassing, healthcare providers. We're bypassing a lot of big players in the healthcare industry right now. And sure, there's, the healthcare industry is a gigantic one. There's a lot of established players, and so none of this is going to be easy. We're not doing it because we think it's going to be easy, but we're doing it because we think it needs to be done, and we think that the change is going in this direction. And then, sooner or later, I think we are going to move that way, and hopefully IRYO is going to be the one to do it, but we'll see.
And if you start the brush fire and get paid to build it, I mean, how does anybody lose in that situation, really? And again, going back to what you said in the very beginning about the value of open source technology.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that we think is really important. If you open source the software, we might not be the smartest people in the room, and there might be smarter people than us. But if you have open source software, anyone with what we do, anyone can take it, run with it, and maybe do even greater things. And that's really the value of open source and of a community.
Heck yeah, man. Well, there was another question, if I'm not mistaken, by the community.
So let me get that other question. So Andrew asks, how would you get brand awareness for the project? And is going directly to the consumer, is that a huge marketing effort?
Again, I think that's where crowdfunded projects have an advantage, because there's a community behind it that supports it. And so, we don't have to have an army of 1,000 sales representatives going around. We can have project supporters, the community behind, who will do some of that work. And one of the things that we've seen in healthcare is that there's this big, especially in healthcare IT, there's this big vendors that spend a lot of money persuading the CEOs and CIOs of healthcare, of hospitals, of clinics to buy their software. But at the same time, we need to move into a world where the patient's going to say, well, I'm going to go to Dr. A instead of Dr. B because Dr. A is a part of IRYO network. And there's all these benefits that I have. Because of that, I can take my data with me. I can exchange it with other clinics. I can get a second opinion really quick, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what we are aiming for.
I got one more question from the community. Ms. Cavs fan asks, how much would a patient pay who has an average 10 years of medical data?
How much they would pay to have that data stored in IRYO network?
Yeah, 10 years worth of medical data.
They wouldn't pay anything for that. That would be free. And the way we structured it is that we will have a 2% yearly inflation of the tokens. And we believe that at 2% yearly inflation will cover all the infrastructure and operational expenses to store that data. So it should always be free for the patients.
Any more questions? I have
so
much.
You can go ahead, Fuzzy. Good questions.
Well, it's wonderful to see this type of ecosystem that you guys are trying to build. No doubt it's a big task, but you know, I'll even take it as far as to say on the marketing side and to the marketing question, you're in a place, a very special place, I might add, that if it works the way that you guys are saying it will with zero knowledge proofs and in a distributed fashion where everybody is working on it and finding bugs collectively, you very well might see people who are patients going to their doctors and demanding things like this. So I don't know how much better marketing you get personally than when people say, this is my right to have this, and I'm going to be very annoying to the infrastructure until it adopts it, right? It's a very powerful tool, and I think it's very, obviously it's very important that we remain responsible and always take critical looks at these things too. But it sounds like you guys have looked at those things too, like the wargaming of the entire ecosystem. And let's face it, like you said, ultimately, when you have a community that's built in and cares about something like a right like this, I think you guys have a very beautiful idea, a beautiful way of laying it out. And I look forward to seeing it, and I look forward to being part of it, man. So I guess with that said, is there anything that you can think of that we could do, or anything that you guys think might be something important that we could do on a small scale community grassroots effort that we could reward people with some EOS bits for participating and to help you guys?
Yeah, definitely. So again, thank you very much for inviting us to chat here and to explain a bit more to the community what we're doing. And yeah, if anyone would like to get involved, so obviously there's the usual channels, IRYO.network website. We have an IRYO network Telegram group. Join us there. We're all there. We're all active. We're all eager to talk to the community. And at the same time, you know, if, like you said before, you have this crowdsourced memes, stuff like that. If, you know, anyone would like to help us with that, to try to get the message across in a funny way, in an interesting way, that's something that we'd be very happy to have. Or if there's any other ideas that you know, anyone has, come and talk to us, and yeah, we'd be more than happy to discuss it. And we're still, by the way, we're still doing airdrops as well. We put aside 5% of the tokens for the airdrops. So, you know, if someone really puts some effort into it, then we might reward them as well with some IRYO tokens.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a great deal. And these are the things that our community, I want to just say to you guys, thank you for making it so people who are doing this stuff and who are building, our special guests that who come on and talk about the things they're building, for giving them the opportunity to have a community that cares about these types of things and can maybe make some masterful memes that will be put into the annals of EOS history and kind of put the IRYO flag up on the Great Hall, so to speak. And thank you very much, obviously, Vasja, for joining up. I know, just a real quick, he's a humble man, so he probably don't want me to say this, but it's very early in the morning for him. He's probably generally not up at this time, and he joined us for this so everybody could learn a little bit more about it, because that's what passionate blockchain nerds do, to get their word out. And I greatly appreciate it. I know SBP does. And thank you, of course, SBP, Thank you, Compound Films, and for everybody who's asked wonderful questions tonight. This is how we change the world, and a little bit at a time with other nerds who are trying to change the world too. So thank you for being part of it. And I guess we'll talk again at some point in time about this. And I look forward to covering it and giving more updates in the future.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So yeah, like you said, it's 3 a.m. in my part of the world. And so yeah, it's pretty late, but it's been a really fun conversation. So thanks again for having me, and hope to talk to you and everyone who's listening again soon.
Get ready for an IRYO meme war, guys. I want to see all of you at your best on this. Make it funny, make it good, and make people laugh about the craziness that's going on with their own medical data, and maybe, just maybe, tell them that they can save it and protect it with technology that we have today. Have a good one. We'll see you next Saturday.
Bye.